The courtroom assaulted my senses the moment I crossed its threshold. A potent mix of gleaming wood polish and the acrid sting of discount cologne drifting from some unseen source. It churned my gut, a queasy blend of nerves and the sheer strangeness of the place. I fumbled with the tie cinched around my neck, a stiff navy strip I'd swiped from a coworker's closet because I'd never owned one myself. My fingers, rough from years of labor, struggled with the knot as I swept my gaze across the space. Rows of benches stretched out before me, their dark wood scuffed from years of restless occupants. A low hum of voices buzzed in the air. Lawyers conferring, spectators whispering, a clerk shuffling papers. Then my eyes landed on her 2 rows ahead, her presence like a beacon I couldn't ignore. Her dark hair was swept into a tight bun, so sleek it caught the harsh fluorescent light like glass. That smirk played on her lips, the one I'd seen 1,000 times, disarming when she wanted it to be, devastating when she didn't. My wife. Beside her sat a lawyer who oozed money, his suit so crisp it seemed to slice the air, his every gesture radiating the kind of confidence that comes with billing by the minute. Behind them her mother loomed, a vision in pearls that gleamed like cold stars against her blouse. She leaned toward the woman next to her, her voice a calculated hiss that carried just far enough. They'll dress her up in gold again. Wait and see. The words were smug, a script she'd rehearsed, and they landed like a jab in my ribs. I wanted to stand, to shout, to unravel their neatly spun lies right there in front of everyone. But I didn't. My hands clenched around the folder resting in my lap, its edges softened from nights spent turning it over, staring at it, debating whether I had the spine to wield what it held. 10 years, that's how long I'd poured myself into her vision. Her wellness studios that now glittered across the city like polished trophies. I juggled 3 jobs to breathe life into them, dragging concrete blocks at construction sites until my back screamed, peddling delivery routes through midnight streets with exhaustion clawing at my eyes, tinkering with logos on a laptop so old it groaned under the strain. All so she could rise, so her dream could take root and flourish. And now there she sat, tossing her head back with a laugh as she delivered a line that cut deeper than any knife. He doesn't even have a proper job. Her tone was breezy, a throwaway jest at a cocktail party, and the room responded with a soft chorus of chuckles. Heat surged up my neck, a flush of shame and fury I couldn't shake. But I wasn't here to wallow or grovel. I'd spent a decade crafting something with her, convinced we were equals, only to watch her erase me the instant her studios turned into a gold mine. To her I'd faded into nothing, a shadow she could dismiss with a quip and a shrug. The judge's gavel slammed down, a sharp crack that sliced through the chatter and stilled the room. My lawyer, a wiry man I could just afford, his suit a touch too big, leaned close, his breath tinged with peppermint. "You set," he murmured. I gave a curt nod, my gaze still fixed on her. She didn't glance my way, too absorbed in a hushed exchange with her attorney, likely plotting how to twist this into a triumphant post for her legion of followers. Wellness icon fins off freeloading X. It'd be a headline tailor-made for her brand, wouldn't it? But I wasn't a freeloader and I wasn't grasping for handouts. I was bone-tired, worn thin from being scrubbed out of the picture, from acting like I hadn't given up everything for her. The folder in my hands felt dense, heavier than its thin contents should allow. Inside was a single page, a single signature, a single vow she'd buried beneath her assent, but I'd kept it close. I'd unearthed it a month back, hidden in a storage box among faded tax forms and doodles I'd sketched for her first studio's logo. Back when we were just 2 dreamers hunched over ramen bowls, plotting a life I thought would bind us forever. The judge barked my name, his voice rough as gravel, and my throat seized. This was the moment. I rose, my legs firm despite the swarm of nerves buzzing through me like static. The room watched, poised for me to stumble, to confirm her portrait of me as a hapless nobody. But I wasn't leaving this place with nothing, not today. I passed the folder to my lawyer, who met my eyes with a quick, steady nod, as if he grasped the cost of this step. As he marched toward the judge's bench, I caught her mother's gaze. Her lips were pursed, her expression dripping with certainty that I'd humiliate myself. Let her believe it. Let them all believe it. I sank back into my seat, my heart pounding a fierce rhythm, but my thoughts were crystalline. That page wasn't just a contract, it was a testament. Proof of what I'd sacrificed, what I'd constructed, what I was due. The lawyer handed it to the judge, and I studied her face. For a fleeting second, her smirk wavered, a crack in her armor as if she sensed the shift. She didn't know the blow yet, but she would. Soon every soul in this room would. I eased back in my chair, the courtroom's drone softening to a distant hum. For the first time in years, I felt the reins in my grasp. Not over her, not over the studios, but over my own narrative. And today I'd begin telling it on my terms. 10 years earlier, our existence was modest but brimming with hope, squeezed into a one-bedroom apartment in Queens that reeked faintly of damp walls, and the soy sauce packets we hoarded from takeout runs. I can still conjure it. The sagging couch we'd salvaged from a curb, its threadbare plaid clashing with the chipped paint. The wobbly kitchen table where we'd perch with mismatched mugs of watery coffee, sketching a future that shimmered just beyond our reach. My hands were coarse then, scarred from hefting lumber across dusty job sites all day. My nights spent hunched over a wheezing laptop, stitching her website together pixel by painstaking pixel. After midnight, I'd dart through the city on a rickety bike, ferrying pizzas with her words looping in my mind. "One day you'll have a piece of this too." She'd murmur it with those wide, luminous eyes, sprawled beside me on our lumpy mattress, ramen bowls teetering on our chests. I trusted her. Not for the payout or the prestige, but because I adored her. Back then, she wasn't the woman hauling me into court to blot me from her tale. Or so I believed. I'd trudge home after a 12-hour shift, boots crusted with dirt, and find her hunched over graph paper, sketching layouts for her first wellness studio. She'd ramble at lightning speed, words tumbling over each other. Yoga sessions, juice bars, sunlit rooms, her hands carving shapes in the air like she could will it into being. I'd listen, nodding, my mind already tallying the extra delivery runs I'd need to pull to keep our rent paid while we scraped together her startup funds. I didn't resent the slog. Her zeal ignited something in me, turned the ache in my joints and the sting of split knuckles into something worthwhile. On breaks at the construction site, I'd lean against a stack of beams, phone pressed to my ear, bartering with suppliers for discounted yoga mats or mirrors she'd spotted at a bargain. At night I'd craft flyers, tweaking fonts and hues until my eyes blurred. The laptop's fan whining in protest. Every dollar I earned, whether from swinging a sledgehammer, dropping off pizzas or freelancing designs, funneled straight into our shared account. It wasn't a dazzling life, but it felt like a partnership. Like every whispered plan and every saved nickel was a stone in a foundation we'd share. The day we inked the lease for her first studio is etched in my memory like a snapshot. The landlord was a gruff old-timer with a cigar clamped between his teeth, his skeptical eyes raking over me like he pegged me as the weak link. I didn't give a damn what he thought. I forked over the deposit, every cent I'd scraped from selling my uncle's battered truck after he passed, and watched her face ignite as she gripped the keys. That night, we toasted with a cheap bottle of Merlot and greasy takeout, sprawled on the apartment floor, the lease spread out like a sacred scroll. She leaned into me, her hair grazing my jaw, and whispered, "We pulled this off together." My chest swelled, a surge of pride and purpose that made me feel invincible. Those early days were brutal. The studio bled money like a burst pipe. Nobody was clamoring for yoga at an unknown spot, wedged in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a discount shop. I took on graveyard shifts at a gas station, pumping fuel and mopping floors in the eerie quiet to cover the shortfall, while she taught to sparse crowds, her voice unwavering despite the empty mats. I'd drop by after work, still in my work boots, to fix a leaking faucet or mount a shelf she'd nabbed on sale. Clients would eye me curiously, probably wondering why the scruffy fix-it guy kept lurking. I didn't care. I was proud of her, proud of what we were forging. When that first studio finally broke even, we threw a tiny bash. Just us, her two instructors, and a playlist crackling from my battered phone. She yanked me into a goofy dance, her laughter ringing out like we'd cracked life's code. I thought that was our launchpad, the start of something unshakable. I didn't spot the drift creeping in. Maybe I should have. Maybe I was too buried in the grind, too fixated on keeping her dream alive to notice her gaze cooling when it landed on me. Back then I didn't grasp how fast love could harden into something else. Something icy, cutting. All I knew was I'd give her every scrap I had. Every hour, every dime, every ounce of faith. And for a stretch it felt sufficient. I'd lie awake beside her, her breath a soft rhythm, marveling at how far we'd climbed from that musty apartment to a studio bearing her name in bold letters. I didn't need my name up there. I didn't need the world to cheer my part. I just needed her to hold it in her heart. And for a while I thought she did. The shift didn't hit like a thunderclap. It oozed in slow and insidious, like damp seeping into a wall you don't notice until it's too late. I'd been so consumed with propping up her dream that I missed the fissures spidering between us. It began when her third studio debuted. A sleek, upscale haven in Manhattan that lured influencers and corporate types with deep pockets. Suddenly, our life wasn't just about yoga and kale smoothies. It was about image and positioning, terms she wielded like they'd always defined us. That's when her mother, Judith, wedged herself in with a vengeance. Judith had always lingered on the fringes, dropping by our old place once or twice a year with her pinched judgments and a perfume that stung my sinuses. Back then, she'd kept her distance. Maybe we were too broke to warrant her meddling. But now, with the studios raking in real cash, she was a fixture, her heels tapping through our upgraded apartment like she owned the lease. I'd stagger home from a construction shift, clothes dusted with grime, and find her perched at our kitchen counter, sipping tea from a dainty cup, her nails clicking against it. She'd barely glance up from her phone as she remarked, "You ought to spruce yourself up. People talk, you know." I'd brush it off, too drained to spar, but her digs burrowed deep. I wasn't some polished exec with a briefcase. I'd never claimed to be. I was the guy who'd hammered her daughter's empire into existence, and I thought that held weight. But Judith had other designs. One night I caught her words drifting from the living room, sharp as a razor. "He'll pull you under," she told my wife like I was a millstone instead of the one bankrolling her rise. "You're a name now, you need to mind who you're tied to." I lingered in the hall, boots still caked with mud, waiting for my wife to counter, to say Judith was full of it. But she didn't. She muttered something too soft to catch, and that silence struck harder than any of her mother's taunts. Things slid downhill from there. My wife started hitting events alone, black tie galas, power lunches, places where I'd clash like a stain in my flannel and denim. She'd breeze in late, her laughter lighter than it had been in ages, spinning tales of venture capitalists and partnerships. I'd ask how it went and she'd toss me a fleeting smile, like she was humoring a child, before vanishing into her phone. I noticed her wedding ring had vanished around then. "It's simpler this way," she said when I pressed, her tone offhand like she was picking a new shampoo. "Some clients think I'm more relatable without it." I didn't push, but I felt the ground buckling beneath me. I kept grinding though, construction days, delivery nights, freelance scraps when I could fit them in. The studios were soaring, and I was still the one wrestling the grunt work. Unclogging pipes at the Brooklyn spot, scrounging cheaper juice suppliers, slapping paint on walls for new openings. But I wasn't her teammate anymore. I was her lackey, one she didn't even nod to. Our home conversations shriveled to logistics, calendars, utility bills, nothing that brushed what we'd been. She'd rave about the brand like it was her true love, more vital than us. One night, she waltzed in from some ritzy dinner and dropped a bombshell. "It's better for the image if people think I'm unattached," she said, like it was a casual footnote, her eyes glued to her screen. I stood there, hands reeking of paint from the studio I'd patched that morning, staring at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, voice low. She shrugged, barely lifting her gaze. "It's just strategy, you understand." But I didn't. I didn't fathom how the woman who'd once twirled with me on our apartment floor could see me as a blank space. Judith's warning echoed, "He'll pull you under." And I realized my wife had swallowed it whole. I was a ghost in the empire I'd helped forge, and worse, I was starting to feel like one in my own skin. I lay awake that night, her steady breaths beside me, wondering where I'd faltered. Had I loved her too fiercely, pushed too hard, or just been too blind to see she'd outpaced me? All I knew was the dream we'd sparked together wasn't mine anymore, and maybe she wasn't either. It was a Thursday when the floor dropped out. I was restocking shelves in the hardware store's aisle 7. Nails and bolts clattering into bins, the fluorescent hum overhead, when a guy in a cheap suit shuffled up. He barely spoke, just confirmed my name, thrust an envelope into my hands and vanished. I stood there, a box of screws dangling from my grip, staring at it like it might bite. I didn't need to tear it open to know the heft. The twist in my gut screamed divorce papers. I stuffed it in my back pocket and kept working, hands on autopilot while my mind reeled. I didn't peek until my break. Perched on a crate in the stockroom, the store's drone muffled through the walls. The text blurred at first. Dissolution of marriage, no support, no property split, then snapped into focus. Taped to the end was a note in her familiar scrawl. On my lawyer's counsel, you've got no stake in the business. I read it twice, then barked a laugh, not from humor but from the sheer absurdity. 10 years of pouring my soul into her studios. Every dollar, every late night, every callous. And she thought she could erase me with ink and a legal stamp. I folded it up, slid it back in the envelope and clocked out my shift. The customer at the register probably thought I'd cracked, grinning like I'd hit the jackpot instead of watching my marriage implode. But I wasn't smiling from glee. I was smiling because a memory clicked into place. She didn't know what I held. That night I drove to the storage locker I'd rented years back. A dank, cramped cube piled with boxes we'd never unpacked after moving. I hadn't been there in ages, but I knew my target. Beneath a stack of yellowed tax returns and sketchpads stuffed with logo drafts for her first studio, I found it. A lone folder, edges curling but whole. Inside was a contract signed and stamped 9 years ago, back when we were a duo. She'd needed $75,000 to secure that first lease, and I'd handed it over without a second thought. Every penny of my uncle's inheritance when he died. I'd never seen it as mine. It was just fuel for her fire. In exchange, she pledged me a 35% equity stake. Her signature looped bold beside mine. I sat on the locker's cold floor, the paper trembling faintly in my hands, letting its gravity settle. She'd forgotten it, lost it under her wealth and her mother's murmurs about my worth. But I hadn't. I'd kept it, not as a trump card, but as a memento of what we'd been, a pact forged when love still tethered us. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, city lights streaking by like they were chasing me to some unseen end. The apartment, ours though it hadn't felt like it in months, was empty when I got in. Her things cluttered the space, high-end bags, yoga gear, but she was absent, probably dazzling a crowd while her lawyer schemed to sever me. I poured a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and reread the contract. It wasn't just cash, it was the years I'd given hauling timber, biking through rain, crafting her brand while she slept. It was the man I'd been, betting love could endure all. I didn't want to destroy her, not truly. But I wouldn't let her wipe me from my own story. That contract was my anchor, the one thing she couldn't twist into a narrative that cast me as the villain. I locked it in a drawer and hit the bed. For the first time in months I slept solid, no dreams, no restlessness. The divorce envelope sat unanswered on the counter. Let her think I was broken. Let her think I'd cave. I wasn't signing yet. I had something she didn't anticipate, something she'd misjudged just like she'd misjudged me. And I'd wield it, not to take her down but to reclaim what was mine. I wasn't wired for lawyers, not like her, with her roster of glossy suits who probably swap cigars with judges. My turf was hardware aisles, job sites, and dive bars, not legal dens or conference calls. So when I stepped into Camille Rivos's office, a tight nook above a Brooklyn deli, I felt like a stray wandering into a showroom. Bookshelves sagged against the walls, a wilted plant drooped in the corner, and the faint tang of corned beef wafted up from below. Her desk was orderly, though piled with files and a thermos that leaked a coffee scent when she unscrewed it. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that sized me up without disdain and a grip that meant she didn't mess around. I'd found her via a coworker who'd said, "She's scrappy but fierce, kept my cousin's house when his ex tried to fleece him." That sealed it. I needed a fighter, not a check casher. I sat opposite her, the contract from the locker clutched tight, and laid it all out. 10 years of toil, the studios I'd helped birth, the divorce papers that hit like a brick, her note denying my stake in what I'd built. My voice held firm, but my fingers fidgeted with the folder's edge, betraying the tempest inside. Camille listened, jotting on a legal pad, her face a mask until I slid the contract over. She snatched it up, scanned it, and an eyebrow arched. "She let this slip her mind?" she asked, a mix of disbelief and wry amusement in her tone. I nodded, easing back in the creaky chair. "She let a lot slip." Camille's lips quirked, not a full smile but near. She read it again, deliberate, her finger tracing the lines about the $75,000 I'd sunk in and the 35% equity promised. The notary seal stood crisp. "This is airtight," she said, setting it down. "Not just airtight, bulletproof." She signed it. You've got proof and it holds water. My shoulders slackened like a load of bricks had tumbled off. I'd spent so long doubting my claim, wondering if I was nuts to think I deserved this, but her certainty anchored it. She leaned in, voice low but solid. You're not snatching from her, you're taking back what's yours. She's got the bucks and the suits, but you've got the facts and this. She tapped the contract. How far you willing to go? I didn't answer quick. Part of me wanted to charge into court, wave that paper like a flag, and watch her smirk melt. But another part, the one recalling her laughter over cheap wine a decade back, just wanted peace to walk away without a brawl. I rubbed my jaw, stubble rasping, thinking of the man I'd been. I'd given her all, not for glory but because I believed in us. Now she was trying to erase me, and I couldn't let it stand. I want what's just, I said finally. I don't need to ruin her, but I'm not her doormat either. Camille nodded like she'd clocked that response. Here's the play, she said, flipping her pad. She listed steps, pulling bank records, digging up emails, anything proving my sweat in those studios. They'll paint you as a leech, she cautioned. Her crew's gonna swing hard, get nasty. You ready? I pictured the courtroom, her mother's sneer, the crowd snickers when she dubbed me a parasite. I'd choked down my pride for years, staying mute as her world eclipsed mine. No more. I'm ready, I said, locking eyes. Camille didn't promise victory or soft-pedal the fight. She just sketched the plan. Counterclaim, demand my equity via the contract, prove my contributions. It's not just cash, she said as I stood, knees creaking. It's about keeping her from rewriting you. I shook her hand, steadier than I'd been in months. Outside, the city roared, horns blaring, folks rushing like they were late for life. I didn't have much. No plush pad, no fat wallet, just a dented truck and a job that roughed my hands. But I had Camille now, and I had that contract. For the first time since those papers landed, I wasn't alone in the ring. I drove home, folder beside me, imagining court. Not from rage, but because I'd earned my voice. Because I wasn't a ghost anymore. The courtroom crackled this time, like the air itself held its breath for the next move. I sat at the plaintiff's table, tie pressed, hands calm on the wood, no longer gripping like I'd fall. Across the room, my wife was a storm of composure, hair impeccable, suit screaming wealth. She murmured to her lawyer, her eyes darting to me once, frigid, fleeting, then away. Her mother sat behind, pearls aglow, whispering something that drew smirks from nearby ears. I caught pitiful and grasping, and my jaw tightened, but I didn't flinch. I'd gulped their poison too long to let it faze me now. Camille sat beside me, notepad open, her calm a bulwark I could lean on. She'd warned me her team would hit first and hit hard, aiming to sink me before I spoke. They did. Her lawyer, a man with a voice like a luxury ad, stood and spun me as a vulture picking at her success. He's resentful, he said, striding for the jury. A man who couldn't keep pace with her vision, now clawing for a share. He dubbed me dead weight. And the room hummed with murmurs. Eyes bore into me, sizing up, buying his line. My wife nodded, her face a sculpted pity like she mourned me. It was a show and she was a master, always had been. Judith leaned forward, her whisper slicing through. Such a disgrace. I wanted to bolt up, yell that I'd built her empire with my bones, but Camille's hand brushed my arm, stay put. Our shot was near. The judge, a grizzled man with a face like weathered rock, observed, pen scratching. When her lawyer sat, Camille rose, steps measured like she was laying a snare. Your Honor, she said, voice clear. We've got evidence that shifts the tale. My pulse spiked as she neared the bench, contract in hand. I'd given it to her that morning, its locker musk still clinging. She said it before the judge, then faced the room. This is a signed, notarized deal from 9 years back, when my client sank $75,000, his full inheritance, into the first studio. He got a 35% equity stake in return. Legal, intact. The room stirred, whispers sparked like static. My wife's face locked, eyes narrowing as she hissed to her lawyer. He floundered, rifling papers like he'd dropped the ball. Judith's mouth pinched, pearls dimming. I stared ahead, but inside a flame flickered, control after years adrift. Camille pressed on. She called me to testify and I walked up, boots thudding. I swore the oath, voice steady despite the stares drilling me. She asked what I'd done for the studios and I spilled it, no fluff, just truth. I spoke of construction gigs funding that first lease, delivery runs keeping us afloat, nights designing logos while my wife slept. I detailed fixing pipes, mounting mirrors, haggling vendors, all gratis, all for her dream. My voice didn't quake, but my throat knotted when I said, I didn't want praise. I thought we were partners. The room hushed. No snickers, no rustles. Camille probed about the $75,000, and I explained, my uncle's estate, handed over blind because I trusted her. I glanced at my wife, brief, and caught a flicker, shame maybe, or shock I wasn't the pushover she'd banked on. Her lawyer tried to rattle me on cross, jabbing why I'd sat on the contract. You never raised it, he sneered. I leaned to the mic, didn't think I'd need to. I trusted her to recall our work. He had no retort. Stepping down, Camille's nod said we'd struck gold. My wife's team scrambled, poise cracking. Her lawyer stood, calling the contract a mix-up. Outdated, null. The judge wasn't swayed. He lifted it, voice arid. Seems plain to me. I sat, pulse leveling. The room that had jeered me weeks ago was mute, air thick with shift. My wife wouldn't look, hands twisting. Judith sat rigid, whispers dead. I felt seen, not the flop they'd drawn, but the man who'd built real. Camille whispered. They're wobbling. More to come. I nodded, hands easing. I wasn't here to raise. I was here to rise, to prove I existed. And with that contract on the bench I had. The courtroom's pulse had flipped, like the wind had changed and all felt it. I sat, hands loose on the table, no longer clawing the edge. Across, my wife's face was stone, but cracks showed, jaw taut, eyes darting to her lawyer like he held a lifeline. Her mother sat stiff, silent for once, pearls lackluster. The contract from that locker had tilted the scales, and Camille wouldn't let it slide. She stood, voice firm, stacking our case like a fortress. I'd spent the prior week scouring files, bank stubs, emails, arming us against her team's spin of me as a grifter. We came loaded. She kicked off with bank transfers, flashing them on screen. Years of my checks, construction, deliveries, gigs, poured into our account, fueling her first studio. Not loans, Camille said, pointing. Contributions, no strings, because he believed in their future. The judge nodded, pen moving, and hope flickered. Her lawyer cut in, claiming household costs. But Camille held firm. She showed emails, me to vendors, cutting deals on mats and lights during site breaks. One read, mirrors half off, up by Saturday. I typed it, hands dusty, thinking it was for us. Now enlarged, it ached, not grief but clarity of my load. The jury perked, faces waking. Camille rolled on. Texts of me wrangling contractors for Brooklyn leaks. Pics of me painting Manhattan walls. A roster I'd penned when her manager quit. Not a bystander, she told the judge. A cornerstone. I glanced at my wife, expecting fire, but her eyes hit the floor, hands fidgeting. Did she feel it, the weight she buried? I didn't linger. This was mine now, truth outshining her yarn. The clincher was her accountant, nervous, glasses slipping. Camille asked about the studio's first investor, the $75,000. He squirmed but swore. Never removed, just relabeled anonymous. She pressed and he named me. My cash, the root of her empire, unpaid, uncredited. Silence crashed in, heavy as lead. The judge paused, eyes sharp on her team. Her lawyer flailed, clerical flubs, but it flopped. Jury and I saw through. Camille sat, eyes gleaming. They're fraying, she breathed. I nodded, throat tight. My buried work surfaced, piece by piece. The jury saw. The judge saw. She saw, willing or not. Her mother's silence was pale, pearls powerless. The room that had mocked me shifted, whispers now queries, maybe respect. I didn't need applause. I needed truth. I wasn't her caricature. I'd laid her foundation. Recess hit and Camille murmured. They're on ropes. You good? I nodded, steady after years adrift. People filed out, but I sat soaking silence. Not for revenge or cash. For the man I'd been, who'd earned recall. With truth bare, he stood tall. The courtroom felt tighter now. Walls pressing the truth into a cage it couldn't flee. I sat, hands clasped, watching the judge sift notes. His face stayed blank, but the air thrummed with fallout. Records, emails, accountants stumble, my guarded contract. My wife sat rigid, fingers digging into her table like it'd hold her up. Her lawyer whispered, but she didn't budge. Her mother, once a fount of bile, was mute, pearls dull. The jury watched, judgment shifting, not at me. Camille leaned close. Rulings here. I nodded, throat tight, not fear but weight. I'd braced to lose, not from doubt, but from years thinking I didn't matter. Now truth piled high, I stood firm. The judge coughed and the room snapped taut. His voice was flat, methodical. Contract $75,000, my years of toil. He noted her team's failure to dent the contract. Their excuses thin against testimony. Evidence is clear, he said, eyes sweeping. Plaintiff holds a 35% stake in the studios, per the deal. My chest eased, breath freed. He added she'd pay 35% profits from day one, or grant shares, or buy me out, millions by Camille's math. Gavel fell and murmurs erupted. Her lawyer leapt, yammering appeal, but the judge waved him off. My wife didn't rise. I looked, she crumpled, mask gone, eyes wet, hands shaking. I expected triumph but felt calm. Storm passed, air still. Her mother stormed out, heels snapping. Eyes turned not to her, to me. Jury, bailiff, reporter, respect, maybe shock. Camille touched me. You okay? I nodded, unsure what okay was. Not to hurt her, she said, reading me. To heal you. True. Not spite, standing, refusing erasure. I'd built with her, left with scars until now. Room thinned, I lingered, noise fading. Her team hustled her out, lawyer plotting, no glance back. I didn't expect it. Love, trust, dreams gone before the gavel. I stood, legs sure, followed Camille out. City pulsed, spring air biting. Future unclear, money helped but wasn't it? It was me fighting to matter. Camille walked beside. You stood tall, she said, smiling faint. I kept on, wind settling. I'd lost much, years, love, self, but gained truth seen by all. Enough for once. Connecticut air was lighter, quieter, shedding city weight. Months post-trial, I swapped Queens for a small house on an oak-lined street. Fences quaint. A two-bedroom, porch creaking, yard fit for a grill and chair to sip beer under stars. Settlement, millions after she bought me out, made it real. I barely dipped in, money didn't mend what broke. Instead I built a new, mine alone. One night, porch crickets loud, it hit. Years of labor, construction, deliveries, gigs, taught me hustle, guarding what's yours, giving all, hoping it stuck. I'd flipped that. Groundwork born, helping workers like carpenters, drivers, mechanics manage cash, save, shield from burns like mine. I'd meet them at diners, job sites, breaking down budgets, contracts plain. Not flashy but right, passing on courtroom lessons. I shunned trial talk but it spread. A roofer, hands like mine, asked over coffee. Took on a yoga bigwig, huh? I shrugged. Sort of. He nodded, digging back into numbers, enough said. Old studio staff texted sometimes. Didn't know you built it. From an instructor. You deserved more. From a handyman. I didn't reply, words kind but stirred ghosts. Painting walls, hauling gear, her voice vowing team. That life was ash and I wasn't chasing it. Days found rhythm. Hardware shifts for feel, groundwork afternoons over greasy tables, porch nights with books or quiet. Needed little food bills, truck still rolling. Settlement grew, Camille's advice. Invest smart, you earned it. I'd figure smart slow, I had time now to breathe, be. I quit her world, no social scrolls, no studio news. They thrived, new spots, influencers, same gloss. Fine. She built on my bones, my mark in those days, no need for her nod. Passing yoga joints, not hers, twinged. Not her. The man who'd bet love beat ambition. I didn't scorn him. He'd landed me here, porch, life mine. One dusk, sky ablaze, community center called Groundwork Buzz wanted me to talk money to workers. I agreed, not for stage but knowing invisibility labors doubt. Post-call I leaned back, stars faint. Trial flashed, court stand, gavel lift. One more than cash, self lost unknowingly. Camille texted. You good. Better. I typed true. Phone down, beer sip, sky deepened. My life not loud but mine. All I'd sought. Community center smelled of old brew and wax, echoing basement halls. I stood up front, table strewn with library printed handouts, budgets, contracts, work's worth. 30 filled chairs, workers' boots scuffed, hands worn. Some women, one noting, one with thermos. How not to be erased. Organizers pick from my tale's echo. Pulse ticked, clipping mic, not nerves but weight. I'd take hammer over crowd any day, but I knew their quiet fear. Work vanishing untraced. Mike crackled. I spoke, not trial first, but days lugging lumber, biking pizzas, logos on a dying laptop. I told of pouring all into a shared dream, believing in us. Voice held, words flowed. No names, her gone, this mine. They leaned in, nodding at late budgets, studio fixes while she taught. Contract, locker fine, $75,000 for 35% in millions. Fought for mine, walked with restart. Not cash, I said, hands on table. Making my work count, not a shadow. A capped guy rasped. When to fight? I saw papers, her note, nothing for all. When they say you're all zero, I said. Stand, not revenge you. He scribbled. I rolled groundwork lessons, track hours, deals. Papers dull till it saves, I said, chuckles rose. Worn trusts blind, love, loyalty obscuring worth. Don't wait for court to know you built it, I said, room hushed, chord struck. Done, they clapped, solid, real. Hands shook, post, questions flew, contracts, savings. Carpenter, gray-bearded, said. Tracking gigs better now. Warmth hit, not pride, purpose. Room cleared, I packed, mic on. Camille slipped in, back wall, smiling faint. Outside, night cool, she said. You shone, didn't know you could. I laughed, rare. Me neither. To truck, stars bright, she added. Building real, not just them, you. I tossed bag in, quiet. Right, groundwork, talk, Connecticut, quiet. Not proving to her world but me. I'd go on, more than loss. Home, road known, trial distant, storm weathered. Money banked, studios hers, I hear, chosen. No hate, neat gone. Porch light glowed, I sat in truck, quiet, cloaking. Legacy, not signs, headlines, but life my hands shaped. Erased once, rewritten line by line. Stepped out, stars ablaze enough.